Welcome to the Uncanny Academy of X-Men Lore. I'm your host, Jared, and today we are talking about the very first issue of X-Men. So, this issue came out in 1963. It's got the art, the Out of This World writing by Stan Lee and the art by megastar Jack Kirby. This was during one of the times in Marvel publishing where they had like this big boom of characters. So it was around the early 60s that we had characters like Spider-Man, Iron Man, Thor. In fact, Spider-Man showed up in 1962, I believe. My camera went out, but just bear with me. But so I'm looking at my Spider-Man book to see when this came out. Hang on, I'm just going to restart my camera real quick. And there you go. All right. So Spider-Man came out in 1962, I believe. Yeah, it's 62. So the X-Men were right after it. And this was written by Stan Lee. So anyway, so let's get started. And we are moving in. Let's do this. Okay. So X-Men issue number 1. Let's get started. So the issue starts off. I'm trying to get this. There you go. So what's kind of funny is that this issue rolls into like this whole. It starts off pretty immediately with the fact that the X school started as just a school for people to learn their powers. Now this is different than the way it was before Krakoa, because in the pre-Krakoa X-Men age, from like Joss Whedon's X-Men to now. To the X-Men leaving for Krakoa. The Xavier School was a school also to like learn math and science and everything, but it just also happened to be also a school where mutants can learn how to use their powers. And here, it's pretty much primarily that. And we have the original X-Men team. We have Angel, Iceman, Beast, and Cyclops for right now. So they're doing like all these training maneuvers for Xavier, and it's like everyone's performing all these little feats. Angel's flying through obstacles. Iceman is just icing up. Is just doing Iceman stuff. Like Professor Xavier tells him, "Okay, so you have free time. Do whatever you want. I'm not going to give you a thing to do. Just enjoy your powers." So as Iceman is like hanging out, Beast throws a bowling ball at him to test his reflexes, and Iceman creates like one of those ramps that like feeds the bowling ball right back at Beast. Then Cyclops shows up, and he basically is told, okay, so take out the other people. So the other X-Men have a little short friendly battle. So they defeat him. So Cyclops wins the fight. And then Xavier's like, okay, so we have a new student showing up. It's a lady. Her name is Jean Grey. That's right. The lady that will grow up to be Phoenix shows up in this issue. I love it. Everyone has their best suits on. Everyone's dressed up for Jean Grey to show up. And so it's hilarious is that so she demonstrates all their to all of them her powers, which is basically like, okay, so I'm a little telepath, but also have telekinesis, meaning I can move objects with my mind. So she moves a book and puts it back. What I love is like, so Professor X leaves, and then Beast immediately starts hitting on Jean Grey, which I think is hilarious. And what's great is Jean Grey lifts off Beast, swings him around, and throws him onto a couch to like get him away from her. It's so good. So Xavier's like, okay, so this school is just to like help us integrate with the world and defend mankind, but there's also mutants that want to take out mankind, and they believe Homo superior is the next stage in human evolution and all that. So then we have Magneto, who has hatched his evil plot, which I believe he wants to use nukes to take out mankind. So he screws around with their. So he goes on to a missile base as they're doing a test and just causes the warhead to like fly out of control and leave. So then what's interesting is that he's walking into the military base and he's like causing all these disturbances with their like equipment. Like he caused the machine gun to dance around and shoot in the air. He caused the tank to go everywhere. And then he actually causes dust particles to be magnetically charged so he could actually spell out surrender the base or I'll take it by force. So then what he ends up doing is again, he causes a missile to take off and then he uses it. So he's basically using he wants control of the base and all the nukes. So he basically launches all these missiles with his magnet powers as a show of force, saying surrender or I'll destroy you. And obviously the military is not so keen on that. He basically creates a magnetic field around the military personnel so they can't like move. Somehow he can do that. Then we have Jean Grey becoming Marvel Girl, and she's in her outfit, and I love how the X-Men are like creepily peering across the corner, like, woo. And I'm like, this was definitely a different time for this team. So, and then I love Professor X. He's like, okay, so X-Men, report to me on the double. You have 15 seconds. Tardiness will not be tolerated. So they just and it says exactly 15 seconds later. He's like, okay, bad mutants attacking. Go do your thing. So everyone rushes off, suits up. Then we see like, let's see, Angel has like, the reason why Angel doesn't look like he has his wings is because he has them strapped. And then, so what happens is they all dress up in their X-Men uniforms, move out, and it turns out Professor X is the one who remote pilots the X-Jet in the Lee X-Men, which I think is pretty cool. So then the military is like, okay, so we can't get past Magneto shields, and the X-Men just show up. They're like, okay, we got this. Like, just give us like 15 minutes to handle this before you guys rush in and start messing around with stuff. They're like, all right, well, you got nothing to lose, but it's not like you're going to have any more luck. So the X-Men fall out and Cyclops uses his optic beams on like full blast to blast his way through Magneto's magnetic field, if you will. The X-Men get in, and then Magneto first off launches all of his missiles as the X-Men breach the perimeter, and then start throwing him out and start sending him after the X-Men. To which point, like they start following Angel, and then Iceman freezes them and causes them to fall and shatter. So that's cool. And then Beast like grabs a missile with his feet, and then Marvel Girl just takes it and just TKs it over into the ocean and just drops it off. And then Angel is flying at Magneto, and then Magneto takes all these metal components and like creates like a cage around Angel. So I think it's pretty cool, pretty dope move. And then Cyclops blasts the cage, and then Magneto's like, okay, so I'm up against a lot of people. Okay, so here's my next plan. So he throws this container of rocket fuel at the X-Men. It's kind of like how in Avengers Civil War where Ant-Man throws a fuel truck at War Machine. So he throws it at them and then it explodes. But what he didn't see is that first Iceman creates like an ice bubble, if you will, around them to protect them. And then also what's revealed is that Cyclops had dug a trench using his optic beam straight down and had created a sort of a haven for them. And then Magneto creates another like magnetic field to push them away, and then he escapes. And then we get, which is kind of interesting, very different than the X-Men we have now, where the military is like, okay, so from now on, whenever we talk about the X-Men, it'll be a tone of honor and all that. So I'm like, okay, this is way different. All right, so that's the end of that issue. Now, okay, I know that was really short, so now I'm going to give you a little bit of my Jared analysis on that. So what I think is really hilarious about this issue, and I mean this totally in a respectful way. I love Stan Lee. I love his writing. It's kind of funny how different everything was. It's like you could not get away with having a couple of guys peer around the corner as a girl is trying on a superhero outfit nowadays. You could not get away with that. Also, I think is funny is how much more of an a-hole Professor Xavier is, because he's like, I expect you here in 15 seconds. Exactly. I will not accept tardiness. And I'm like, oh boy, this is really nuts. He's really kind of crazy there. And I love how the thing I like about Stan Lee's writing is that he uses a lot of these like bravado, I call it bravado language, where he's like, you shall not defeat me. I shall use the power of my powers, if you will, to defeat you. And it's like, and I like how like Stanley always has, okay, so he thinks he can attack me, but what he doesn't know, the character goes into this big like explanation about their powers. What Magneto doesn't know is that if I angle my optic beams just right, I can block his magnets. That's not in any way what happened, but I'm just adding on. I'm just giving a little communication on that. So I like that. I like how different everything is. Where like there wasn't like the X jet was like right underneath the Xavier mansion. It was like they had to take Professor Xavier's car there. Which I thought was kind of it's kind of cool seeing where all these characters came from. And it's interesting seeing, like, for one thing, Beast is a human being and not like a cat monster. Like, this is Beast right here. So I found that pretty cool. I like how Iceman, he's just a snowman. Iceman is literally just a snowman, to the point where when Xavier is like, okay, Iceman, do whatever you want. It's free play. Iceman literally turns himself into a snowman. And then Beast chucks a bowling ball at him. I love that. So then I like how each X-Men has like a training course tailored to them. I thought that was really cool. And then another thing, I liked how the military in this whole story is like regretting making everything out of metal. I'm like, okay, guys, you're throwing tanks and missiles at Magneto. Maybe it's time to change the materials that everything is made out of. I don't know about you, but I think that'd be a good idea. So, and then, yeah, I like how when Magneto thinks the X-Men blew up, I think it's like Iceman's like, little did you know, Cyclops dug a trench. It's like I like how each of the characters go into that, go into the explanations behind their powers. Oh, but it appears if I angle it just right, I can negate whatever the hell Magneto does. And I mean, another thing I like about this is I like how innocent everything is, because I know that we're talking about, like, we're still talking about superheroes fighting supervillains and all that. But what I mean by this is that this was back before comics got so depressing and, like, I mean, I don't want to say mature because, well, you can find mature themes in like any story. Heck, this one has a couple of dudes peering around the corner as the girl's changing. I'm like, okay, guys. But what I mean by this is that this is before you had like stories like Clone Saga, where Spider-Man's dead girlfriend was cloned, and then stuff happened to her. I'm being very delicate on that because this is a G-rated show. But anyway, it's like, I'm just like, come on, guys. This is really like not getting at a certain point. And Lad and I were having this conversation like a couple of days ago, and we're like, at a certain point, these stories have gotten pretty freaking ridiculous. Which is why I recently started reading like a lot of the stories from like the early days of Marvel Comics and DC Comics, because a lot of that stuff was like, no, here's a story. We're just going to tell really fun storylines, which, what's interesting, the comics code was, I understand that it stifles creativity and everything, but to a certain degree, it was also kind of good in that it can't, like, let me put it this way, under the comics code, there's no way like the Clone Saga would have come out the way it was. They would have had to revise that constantly. So, I mean, I could see value in it. I still personally don't think it was a good implementation, but that's besides the point. But anyway, I also like how the story, like, this is where we first start to like see the X-Men aren't like accepted, because when Marvel Girl shows up, Professor Xavier tells her, "Welcome to the Charles Xavier School. Let me tell you a little bit about the place. I formed it because, well, I'm a telepath, and I realized that that people are gonna fear me, hate me, and never accept me. No matter what I do, no one will ever like see me as anything other than a mutant." So I like how they're still laying the groundwork behind that concept that has become so central to the X-Men comics. It's nice seeing all of the what's the word? That's the right word. It's nice seeing all of the foreshadowing of what's to come when the X-Men are like really solidified as this fantastic team, because it wasn't until like it wasn't until Giant Size X-Men #1 where the X-Men really were cemented as like this pillar of Marvel. Because what's interesting, this series under Stan Lee and Steve and that's the name of the guy. Okay, Jack Kirby. The Lee and Kirby X-Men were canceled, and what happened was, and you guys will want to get this full story. There's an amazing documentary on Amazon Prime about Chris Claremont. He was one of the writers that like really defined the X-Men, and he came in after the Len Wein run, and Len Wein was the creator of Wolverine and such. So what happened was, so the book's canceled, and originally they were gonna turn it into an anthology book. What that means is they would bring it back, and then whenever it would publish, it wouldn't be any new stories. It would just be like they're publishing old storylines from the X-Men. And if you pay attention to the rumors too, the rumors are is that comic book sales have gotten so bad that if these companies don't start selling more comics, their parent companies, Warner Brothers or AT&T and Disney, are going to tell DC and Marvel respectively to only publish back issues. Because what they saw during the pandemic, and I know that this is a tangent, but I'm getting into that. It's a podcast. I just want to give you guys lots of information, have a good time with you guys. The idea is that they're going to have them only publish back issues, because what they saw during the pandemic is that new stories were not that popular, but back issues, people were going back through back issues constantly, and back issue sales, like for like trade paperbacks and such, and also just back single issues, were booming. So these companies probably figure and my camera had issues again. These companies are figuring that, okay, so if these storylines are going to get like really, if we're not going to be able to properly like profit from these storylines, there we go. If we're not going to be able to get the profits we would like to see from these storylines, then we're going to have to like reorient toward what sells. And honestly, to a certain degree, I think this would be a good idea, because a lot of comic book fans, myself included, have like basically going through event fatigue, where like every time there's another event, multiple taking place at the same time, but couldn't take place at the same time, I guess, was like, or there's no indication of when the storyline takes place. Like last year, you had 3 Jokers, Joker War, and then Dark Knight's Death Metal. Like, give me a chronology and I can follow this. But guys, come on. Timon, Snyder, Lee, someone give me an idea of when these storylines take place. And it's like, it's just all crossovers over and over and over and over again. I'm like, come on, guys. Stop with the crossovers. Focus on character development and getting us all these cool and interesting characters and diversifying the cast. And so anyway, back to what I was saying. So the X-Men were canceled, and then Marvel's idea was, okay, so a lot of our books sell well overseas, so let's create a new X-Men team, new X-Men book. This is where Giant Size X-Men #1 comes in. well, let's make an international team because once again, like I said a second ago, a lot of Marvel books were really popular overseas. So what they ended up doing is they have like Nightcrawler, he's German, Colossus is Russian, Storm's African, Wolverine's Canadian, Cyclops is American, and you also have Warpath, who's Native American. And what's interesting about Colossus is that this was coming out during the Cold War, and he's a Russian. So that's pretty big to have like a Russian superhero in American media. That was pretty sweet. And then you have that was also the introduction of the mutant island of Krakoa, which plays a big role into the Hickman era of X-Men. And originally started off as an X-Men adversary. And I believe they talk about it in Hawks and Pox, House of X Powers 10. I will be covering that storyline soon. I'm building up to it. I want to give you guys a basic like understanding of the X-Men, even if you have already done this and give you guys a review, just so when you guys approach it, you understand what I'm referencing when I talk about this. So anyway, so you have Giant Size X-Men #1, and this is where you have characters like this is where you start to have the X-Men that you and I already know on the team. Like we have Storm. Wolverine was interesting because when he first showed up in a Hulk comic, and they reference it in this story in Giant Size X-Men #1. And he basically said, and when Professor Xavier goes to recruit him, he goes, "Hey, you may not know this, but you're a mutant." And back then, when Wolverine was first created, the idea was that his claws were just parts of his gloves; they were just extended, and he could stab people with them. But what Claremont says, no, how about this? I make it come out of his hand, so that way, whenever he pops his claws, he's like cutting his own skin, so there's a certain amount of damage and pain to that, so it sort of humanizes Wolverine. So I find that very cool. I like watching documentaries about creators who like go into what they were thinking of when they created these characters. It's one of my, you could say, passion projects. So anyway, that was basically what happened with the X-Men. So you have Giant Size X-Men #1, and it sells like hotcakes. So they decided to keep this going, and then they bring in Claremont, and Claremont's the guy who like wrote like the best storylines of all time for the X-Men, in my opinion, short of Hickman. So let's actually, he's not short of Hickman. Hickman short of. What I mean is that it's Claremont and then Hickman in terms of my X-Men stories. But anyway, Claremont went in there, came onto the scene. He started writing X-Men comics. And then within 3 issues, Dark Phoenix Saga, and then Dark Phoenix Saga. It's like he does the whole Jean Grey thing, because when Kirby, when Lee and Kirby were working on Jean Grey, she was like the damsel in distress character back then. But Claremont was like, no, I'm going to make her an actual character. In fact, he did that with like a lot of his different characters. He's known for basically saying, when I'm making a character, the first thing I ask myself is there a reason why this character can't be female? And that's why I would say most of the well-known Marvel female Marvel characters are X-Men affiliated, which was kind of bad for Marvel when like DC came out with the Wonder Woman movie, and it was fantastic. I mean, Wonder Woman 1. And then you get like Captain Marvel. I'm like, yeah, because here's the thing, again, Marvel is constantly trying to create to get their Wonder Woman, but here's the thing: all their characters that are legitimately their Wonder Woman and not Carol Danvers are owned by other companies. Like any type of Hulk thing is owned by Universal, and the X-Men are owned by Fox. So it was like this thing. Because they could have made a Storm movie, and that would have been super dope. I would definitely gone to see a Storm movie. So anyway, during Claremont's run, this is where you have Shadowcat, Kitty Pryde showing up. You have Magneto becoming a good guy, because the idea was Claremont's whole plan, what he wanted to do, what he eventually was not allowed to do, was have Magneto turn completely good and then become the leader of the X-Men and have Xavier die. That was eventually the whole plan, and they're sort of doing something like that in the Hickman era, like particularly at the beginning with Hawks and Pox, because you had Magneto and Xavier, it being retcon that they always teamed up. So I find that I like seeing how like Hickman sort of took the ideas of Claremont that were rejected then and implemented them. I like that. So that's where you basically go when it comes to X-Men. So you start off with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. This also shows that not everything Stan Lee did in the 60s was an instant hit. Because remember, we think of the 60s, we think of characters like Iron Man, Spider-Man, not Captain America, he was already in there, Thor, and all these different like staples of Marvel that we all think about when we think of Marvel. But nowadays it's not that anymore. But we do the X-Men, and the X-Men series was canceled. It's just Claremont came in, and Ween came in, then Claremont. But Claremont basically came in and said, I'm going to make these characters actually characters, and we're going to actually make them like superheroes. And we're going to turn we're not going to have like female characters that are there for the sake of having a female character. We're going to make them actually good characters, which that's why I say the X-Men is like the gold standard for diversity in comics, because the whole idea was you can make great storylines with all these different characters and have a diverse cast. All you have to do is make actually good characters, which I think is something that's lost nowadays in American media, because the whole idea about how we just need outward diversity. We need these characters in there for the sake of having diversity. But that's another discussion for another episode. But anyway, that's the reason why I think that's the reason why I've always said X-Men is like the gold standard for diversity in comics. Again, because their whole idea was, okay, in addition to the whole analogy for being othered, and it's general enough so it applies to everyone, they also created fantastic characters that actually had arcs. That's another problem with the whole constantly doing events. You don't have time to build up these characters, because the X-Men storylines, for the most part, for like the longest time, did not do events. They just had like these long stretches where you have tons of character development. So by the time you got to like an event, you were falling in love with these characters already, and they were already pillars of Marvel. So again, that's why the X-Men are like I'm going to say this one more time. That's why X-Men are the gold standard of diversity in comics. That can be our new thing. Drink whenever Jared says X-Men are the gold standard of diversity in comics. But anyway, so that's X-Men #1. It's one of my. It was a very interesting read for me, coming from a guy that like read. Heck, last time we did a story episode, we covered the Second Coming. Way different than the Stan Lee, and Jack Kirby X-Men. Oh, it was kind of interesting. Claremont's era had Emma Frost be the White Queen, the bad guy, but then I think it was Grant Morrison, and I have an issue of that where Emma Frost joins the X-Men. So it was during his run that he basically took like a lot of these characters and turned them good. Speaking of that, when Claremont first came up with the idea of Dark Phoenix, he went to the editor-in-chief Jim Shooter and says, hey, I want to turn Jean Grey bad, and then have like the Phoenix Saga and all that stuff. So what Jim Shooter says is that, hey, that's actually a good idea, because in Marvel we have tons of storylines of characters, of evil characters turning good, of like villainous characters becoming heroic. We've never had a hero turn like Doctor Doom level of evil. So go ahead and do that. And then the whole idea is that, so they did the Phoenix Saga, and then eventually with the Dark Phoenix Saga, they're like, okay, so what do we do with Jean Grey now? So the idea was like, okay, so what if we have her put in prison? The X-Men have to rescue her, and then that just seemed kind of repetitive. So Shooter tells Claremont, okay, so you handle this. You're the writer. You handle this. So then Claremont's like, hell with it. I'll just kill her. And that's where you get the whole death of Jean Grey thing. That's just another a little Academy fact I thought you guys might enjoy. So So let's see. I guess that could be it for right now. If you guys have any ideas for X-Men content that you would like to see, just drop in the comments, and I will 100 and it will be addressed. I'm a man of the people. So anything you guys want to see, 100%, we'll talk about it. This Friday is going to be like a massive episode. We're going to talk about a lot of different content, starting with Lad and I will be reviewing like Marvel's What If. We'll be doing a Bad Batch finale review. We're going to be reviewing both parts of the finale. And then we're going to be talking about, by special request by one of our listeners, we will be doing on Friday a long form discussion of the DC Injustice animated movie that was announced like a couple months ago. I know I did a news episode on it, but I feel like it's only right for something so momentous to like have a day where we talk about Injustice, give the basic idea of the storyline, and then talk about where it could go. Because here's a little teaser. I think it could be the next DC animated movie universe. Because there's so much story in the Injustice comics that it just doesn't seem right to just leave it at that. Or it could be an animated series too, that it could use the movie to launch the series. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. We'll talk about it on Friday. I hope you guys enjoyed this special episode of the Uncanny Academy of X-Men Lore, and we will see you guys on Friday or Thursday too, because I do the news show on Thursdays. But for a long form show, we will see you on Fridays. All right, class is out of session. See ya.